Hi, and welcome to Critical Rep, a podcast where we explore representation in popular film media using a critical lens. We are two sociologists that want to expand our knowledge of representation in media and want to take you along for the ride. I'm Kat,
I'm Jenna.
and we're going to bring you critical analysis of one TV show or movie per week that tackles some serious topics, including race, sex and gender, class and justice, and much more. So join us for a fun and interesting discussion of some popular shows where we delve deep into how and what they represent for those watching. So I'm Kat. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as a queer intersectional feminist, social justice, and environmental justice advocate, and more recently, an abolitionist. I'm also a sociologist, writer, researcher, and lover of animals and nature. So,
And I'm Jenna. The pronouns are they, them, and ditto to most of that. So I'm also a queer intersectional feminist. I am also queer. So there's queer intersectional feminist, and then I also myself am queer. I am also fairly recently an abolitionist and a social advocate for many social issues, including the LGBTQIA plus community. I'm impressed that I did that so quickly. BIPOC community, etc., etc. I guess that's me.
yeah. Cool. Yeah, no, I feel like that's great. I also feel like we should probably like unpack some of these labels that we just sort of called ourselves, because a lot of them are like very specific and
True. Some of them are very
sometimes
vague.
yeah, sometimes people aren't really totally sure what all of these things mean. So yeah, queer, I'm queer identified as well. A queer intersectional feminist is sort of someone that is a feminist, which means that you believe that women and men and all genders should be treated equally. The intersection is that you understand that there are other identities involved in that sort of fight for equality and justice. And the inclusion of queer is also like an important one for us specifically because we both identify as queer. Is there anything you wanted to add?
I think that was a better definition of queer intersectional feminism than I could have given. Yeah, so yes to all of that. Let's talk about abolitionism, because I don't think that people really know what that means. And I don't think that even if they do know what it's referring to, I still don't think that they know what that means. So
Yeah.
I guess abolitionism is the goal of abolishing the police state and police force and that entire system, because it is inherently sexist, racist, and queerphobic. You just have to look at history, really, and not even history. Look at what's been happening very recently up to probably today, whenever this episode gets posted. I bet you that something new has come out.
Yeah.
So the idea behind abolitionism,
Yep, you got it.
Great with words. The idea behind abolitionism is that we want to defund, disarm, and dismantle the police and take those funds and put them into social programs like education and healthcare and drug rehabilitation and justice reform and, you know, many, many other things that lead to the quote unquote need of police.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. I also just want to note that when we're talking about police abolition, we're also talking about prison abolition because they're one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
One leads to the other. And so this is sort of a bigger system of, I don't know, like institutions, I guess, that we've built in our society that I sort of more recently been looking into because of the sort of resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and the revolution that's happening right now in the world, all across the world. And so that sort of pushed me into learning more about it and becoming an abolitionist in the sense that I realized that we don't actually need the police or prisons, because we criminalize things that shouldn't be criminalized. Like you said, there's so many issues with social identity that are just rampant in police forces, and they're basically there's a state sanctioned bullies and murderers that get away with it because they can. So I totally agree when we say that we want the resources that police officers and subsequently prisons use up to be reallocated into community programs, whatever that may look like for your community or your next door community or our country's community as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then that, I guess, feeds right into social justice advocacy, which I take to be standing up both from within the communities that I occupy, as well as being an ally for other communities, whether that's other types of identities within the queer community, whether that's the BIPOC communities, again, women and the unhoused populations. We can go on and on, but basically it's advocating for a better world so that our society as a whole feels just, is kind of a way of saying it using the same words.
Yeah, I mean, I use words like dismantling a lot. I want to dismantle the systems and the institutions that we've built.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of my social justice work that I do, and environmental justice, because I find it all is sort of intersectional, in the sense that, we can't address one issue without addressing all of the other issues, because the system was built for exploitation, and without, like, we can't take one of those sort of cogs out of the machine without the whole thing crumbling. Or
Totally.
yeah, so I'm just like, I'm all for, like, let's start fresh with a new system.
I guess we're assuming that people also know what BIPOC stands for.
Right, yeah.
So if you are here and have never heard the term BIPOC, it stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. So just one quick way to say all of those groups of people without leaving any of those groups of people out.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. That's an important one. And I also just wanted to note, for those who aren't watching on YouTube, but are just listening to the podcast, we are both white women.
Nope.
Or sorry, I'm a white woman, I should say. You're both white people.
There you go.
And so we are going to be talking about race and race issues on this podcast, but we're doing it from a lens of how we identify. So hopefully that will be, full allyship and through the anti-racist lens.
Totally. I guess I will just quickly hop in and interject because I so drastically said no to you calling me a woman, which is totally fine. We're both still learning. All is good.
Yeah.
But so I identify as non-binary, gender fluid. So sometimes, yes, I am a woman. Other times I am not. Most of the time I am not, actually, because I float through so many different genders, and that's another area of my social justice advocacy as well, is dismantling the gender binary, because it took me 30 years to jump out of that for myself and realize that just because you feel this femininity when you're a woman does not negate all the other genders that you float into. So fuck the gender binary. Fuck
Yeah.
just everything, basically. um, yeah, so I guess I'll just interject there. Some days I might call myself a woman because on those days I probably am one, but I don't really know where I'm sitting today. So,
Yeah, no, I appreciate you clarifying that and also interjecting because I think that's something that I'm still learning to sort of dismantle the gender binary in my own mind with pronouns and identity, and that's like the work I do um, often with my advocacy. So yeah, so it's like it's great as an example of where I sort of corrected myself and you corrected me as well. And it's something that
mhm,
we have to like live and learn through and process because language is fluid and clearly so is your gender. So like that's a cool thing to be able to discuss and work through
mhm,
together.
for sure. And I think that was a really good example of how to be a proper ally too, is to not get defensive, to realize that you made a mistake, apologize and correct and move on. Um,
Yeah.
and like I know that you are actively working to dismantling that in your own mind, and it's hard, like that's how we're raised. That's all we ever hear is there's men and women. So of
Mhm.
course, it's going to take a lot of time to get rid of that language in your own mind.
Mhm.
Um, so I guess with that being said, we are, both Kat and myself, trying to be the best allies that we can be to all communities that we do not belong to.
Mhm.
So, in any of these episodes, if you hear us saying something that is wrong or is, I hope that we won't say anything inappropriate
Mhm.
because we do approach this so.
Thoughtfully.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah.
Thinking lots. Um, so just know that if you are going to call us in and correct us on something, we will take that and we
Mhm.
will not get defensive. We will not use any of the tactics that are typically used by white people or no, yeah, I guess that's kind of it because
Yeah. It's white
because
people.
we're both queer. But yeah, so we won't use any of those kind of tactics to say, oh, no, you know what, we're educated in this, blah, 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 blah. No. If you hear anything on any of our episodes and you're like, leave a comment, send an email. We will get back to you and we will correct ourselves on our next episode.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for saying that because that's a really important one because I think a lot of social justice work, especially, there's a lot of sort of trying to figure out what the right language is. And a lot of times I think that people feel like they're doing something wrong, but really it's a journey and we're all learning together and yeah, we want to be corrected because that's how you learn and that's how you do move forward in a productive and helpful way to the
Mhm.
people we want to advocate for, whether we're part of those
Absolutely.
groups or not. So
Yeah, definitely. Um, And for a lot of these episodes, we will be bringing in um, knowledge from people from the groups if we are not part of that community, so that we are elevating voices of people from that community rather than speaking for them as to white people. So we do have articles and things that have been written by BIPOC people for the episodes where we discuss race, for ones where we talk about sexuality and gender. We kind of got that. Um, we're okay there. But again, if it's someone within the queer community that we don't personally identify as, we will try to find information from that group of people as well.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I guess that's a segue into why do we want to do this? Why are we talking about television, film media?
Oh,
Um, yeah, there's lots of reasons.
there's
um,
so many reasons. So, geez, where do we even start? So I first got really interested in representation in media after I had gone through chemotherapy treatment for cancer and started seeing all of these teeny bot movies that were romances that were talking about characters that had cancer, and I would watch them and I was horrified. I was like, this is not representative of the experience whatsoever. Not like almost none of this is based in reality. It's horrible. And then when I came out um, a year or two ago, probably, which is something that we can talk about later again,
Mm-hmm.
why people can take so long to come out. Um, I realized part of the reason was because there was no representation of my sexuality and my gender anywhere, so
Mm-hmm.
how could you possibly come out as something if you don't even know that it exists?
Yes.
um, so it's important to see accurate representation of every type of person, every that comes from every walk of life. It's important to see that so that you can see yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I guess my interest, like, what didn't really come from a particular experience like that, but I've always sort of been interested in um, and appreciate, I guess, the understanding of the impact that sort of popular film media has on broader society. Um, and sort of a fun example of that is like when I see like a meme and then, or I see a show and then it's memeified, or a moment of it is memeified, and it makes us giggle, and that's the role of memes. But it really impacts. Like, there's so many memes and shows and things that we sort of adopt as our own understandings of the world, and it changes our perspective. And so yeah, so I think that what you said is totally true. It's like we need to be able to see these representations of different kinds of people so that we can be who we need and want to be in our lives. And
Hmm.
that's fairly limited still, I think, in sort of the popular media, uh, film media, I should say, because although these conversations are becoming more frequent, I think that the changes are actually really slow still, which is something that, you know,
Hmm.
that's why we're starting these conversations, like, for this topic too.
Totally. And I'd said it's important to be able to see yourself in media, but I also think that it's very important to see other types of people
Yeah.
in media so that you're not just in your little bubble, not understanding, you know, what gay people are, what trans people are, and what black people are, things like that, especially if you grow up in like a small town or a suburb, and you're white and you don't have anyone queer in your family, and kind of how we grew up, really.
Hmm.
um, so I think that it's important to have that in the media so that people that grow up in those situations have something to look to
Hmm.
say, oh, okay. And and it's important, it's so critical that those representations are not caricatures of those
Hmm.
people.
Yeah.
There's that saying that there's queer characters written for queer people, and then there's queer characters written for straight people.
Yep.
And I think you can argue that for literally every group of people that exists.
Yeah, every identity that's, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's something I was gonna bring up too, is like there's so many tropes that are problematic in film media, and so they perpetuate stereotypes. And
Hmm.
there is a long history of this with film particularly. So yeah, so I'm hoping that our podcast will be able to sort of unpack some of that through sort of looking at, I guess, just some more recent shows and movies that we've seen or can discuss as far as the, I guess, topics that we have come up with.
Totally. So I guess we can move on and tell whoever's listening or watching what they can expect from season 1 of Critical Rep. So I'll take this, I guess.
Okay.
So for season 1, we have identified a few main themes that are both topical and very important that we want to discuss within popular film media. That's including television. Actually, I think for season 1, they're all television shows. I don't think we have any movies. So these topics include race, sex and gender, class and justice, and then there's going to be like a couple other things like tossed in throughout, but those are our 3 main overarching topics. So this season of Critical Rep, we pick one show, because I think we've determined that there's no movies this season. Pick one show per episode that demonstrates whichever of those overarching themes we're discussing that week. We will have a critical discussion about the representation on that show. And then as we move through the season, we will be tying them all together, culminating in the analysis, culminating in the analysis of one final TV show that involves so many of these topics that it's actually going to be a 3-episode arc on this podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to hopefully sort of get people engaged and build up into sort of this last show that we've chosen to demonstrate all of the themes that we're going to be talking about leading up to it. So
absolutely. Very excited.
Awesome. Yeah, so I guess that's a little bit about us. That's why we're starting this podcast. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out. We do have our socials are all at Critical Rep Pod, which is Critical Rep with 1 P and then OD. And then our email is criticalreppodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's only 1 P. So please like and share on whatever platform you prefer. Write us a review on iTunes. So subscribe on YouTube, whatever you feel like doing. Your support is always appreciated. And the Critical Rep podcast is hosted by Jenna and myself, Kat, 2 people who want to explore the world of representation in popular film media. So if you have any questions, contact us. Until next time, think critical and remember representation matters.